Welcome, everybody, to Ask Strong Towns Anything with Chuck Marohn. Thank you, everyone who is here live. Thanks, everyone who sent in questions. We're going to try to get to as many of these questions as possible. Actually, one of the very first questions I'd planned on getting to, because I wasn't sure if she was going to be here, is from Victoria in Teaneck, New Jersey. And so, Victoria, do you mind unmuting and asking your question live? If you need help remembering what it was, I have it written down here, but probably you can
Thank
remember.
you. I do have that mom brain. Things get a little fuzzy. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. Thank you, Chuck. Basically, our main street, Cedar Lane in Teaneck, New Jersey, is in like dire need of like revitalization. It mostly has like 1 to 2 story buildings on it, but it's dying. Restaurants like do not thrive there. We had one restaurant open and close in less than 6 months. So the conversation about it though, and most of the town is like very interested in revitalizing it. So like there's a common goal there for sure. The barrier that the council, specifically the mayor, has identified is that there is multi-generational ownership of basically almost all of the buildings on this strip. Meaning like, and he says like some of the ownership dates back to the Mayflower. So everything is paid off. They're just collecting revenue at this point. So there is no incentive for them to make any changes or updates, basically. And so he's like ready to just move in with like eminent domain, or in our area, we call it area of need and rehabilitation or redevelopment, to kind of just plow through with some sort of revitalization. So but I'm convinced there might be a middle way first before we go that way. So that's
Yeah.
what I need her.
So tell me the name of the city again. I didn't catch that at the beginning.
Surely, it's Teaneck, New Jersey.
Oh, how do you spell that?
Teaneck.
Yeah.
Teaneck.
Oh, got you. Okay. I see now. All
Mhm.
right. I just love to look at places when people are talking about them. So, okay. There's a lot going on around you.
So
Um,
New
you
Jersey
know,
is the Garden State. So where is Teaneck in relation to like Jersey City or
Um, it's about 20 minutes from Jersey City, but with traffic, it's usually 45. We're close to Manhattan as well. About an hour by bus. So
yeah.
it's a pretty good area in terms of opportunity.
Yeah. It's not like you're some dying small town somewhere.
Correct.
Right? So here, yeah, eminent domain is further down the list of things that you'd want to do. If this were a dying small town, I would be talking about getting housing around the downtown, getting housing connected to the downtown. I'm suspecting just by looking at your place briefly that you've done a lot of those things. Um, is that fair, Victoria? I mean, if it feels like you've got enough development, enough people, enough stuff where people within walking distance of downtown can actually get there in a reasonable way. Is that fair?
I would say like Teaneck is like 90% plus single family housing, and moving into anything beyond that this is why I started Strong Towns Teaneck because nobody
Yeah.
wants change. Um, so yes, like a sizable amount of people, like even myself, can walk downtown. It takes me 10, 15 minutes to walk anywhere. But I do think that our population is aging. And so not as many people are walking. And it's really expensive to live here too. So I mean, we got lucky. Lucky. It was expensive to buy our house,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
got lucky. But we got so it's harder for new families to come in. Um, just one quick side story about development. There's a parking lot behind the buildings on Cedar Lane that people
So
really want to save.
yeah, so are we talking primarily about Cedar Lane? Is that where
I'm
you
I'm talking about Cedar Lane specifically, yes,
Yeah.
but redevelopment
Okay.
as a whole has been kind of plowed down people's throats with like huge developments, like 5+ story buildings or 4+story, 300 units in the middle of a residential area, which is why
Right.
this conversation is so necessary. We're in the process of trying to convince the council to build backwards from Cedar Lane. So they're working on a parcel of land to make a 3, 4 story build apartment building behind Cedar Lane, which would probably impact the development directly on the street. So we're trying to get them to include that parcel so they can build taller on the street and then go backwards to lower levels so it's not as crazy against the single family houses that are behind it. But yeah,
Yeah.
development has been a problem here.
Let me give you let me give you a thought that is short of eminent domain. And let me say, if your mayor and your city council are willing to use eminent domain, that means they're willing to take out like the bazooka, and like start firing shots at people. Let me give you what would be like a machete as opposed to a bazooka. So again, a little bit harsh, but not as harsh. Um, this main street is old, right? Like I'm looking at the pavement. The pavement needs to be fixed. The sidewalks are a little bit narrow.
The
There aren't
pavement
really.
was just recently fixed. That's a county
Oh,
road, by
really?
the way.
Oh, okay. So the map, this is Google is a little old. Okay, that might be a little harder then. Because one of the things, when you have historic ownership, so people who have owned it multiple generations, the positive of that is that they can generally run a business or run the place at a lower burn rate because they don't have debt service costs. They own the property outright. So they don't have a lot of overhead burden that, say, like a new company coming in and buying from them would be taking on debt likely to buy that place. Or if they didn't take on debt, they would have a return on investment schedule where they would need to get a lot of income out of that to retire that investment quickly. If you're a historic owner, you don't have that. And so it allows you to open up businesses that wouldn't normally be able to open up there because you just have different cash flow needs. If that is the problem though, if you're saying like we're stuck and these places are closed, they are just sitting on the investment waiting for other people to develop, they're allowing their property value appreciation to basically be their investment, and so they're going to sit around for another decade or two while everybody else does all the hard work. The way to dislodge that is to actually increase their direct costs. And you do that, I mean, you don't have a land value tax, so you can't really go that route. The thing that you can do is assessment. What I have seen these places change overnight is when you go in and do a project and then everybody gets a $50,000 bill for their share of that project. Um, if you just redid Main Street, you maybe have lost the ability to do that. But if I were looking at this and saying, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to widen out the sidewalks, I'm going to put in better lighting, I'm going to really make this Main Street, like I'm going to take the Main Street itself and bring it up to the next level. And that cost difference, I'm going to assess to those property owners. In other words, they're going to get a bill for that. What happens in people that have been sitting around as essentially like land speculators is that they have to confront, do I eat that cost or do I sell the property? And I mean, I guess there's a third option. Do I do something productive with it? Do I now rent it out or do something? Either of those last two ones are fine. And the first one gets to be really uncomfortable for them. So if people are willing to do annexation, or I'm sorry, do eminent domain, the idea of some type of, public investment, adding value, recouping that cost by doing an assessment starts to shake things up. The other thing that I've seen work in places is just to get really serious about building code enforcement. I'm giving you like the stick and not the carrot side of this, because for people who are in a sense like don't have any holding costs, the carrot part doesn't really work all that well. I mean, if you're willing to let the place sit vacant, your long-term strategy, you're saying it's more of a burden to do something with this than not. And the long-term strategy is good for me to just sit here and let it appreciate. And so you're kind of just automatically into the carrot category. I'm sorry, the stick category. The other stick thing that you could do that I've seen be really helpful is just to get really serious about building code enforcement. Hey, no one's living in this place or no one's occupying this place. We need to do an inspection. Hey, we've got a code that requires you to keep the outside of your place to a certain standard and you're not there. Hey, we've got complaints about, people hanging out in your place after hours or, garbage in front of your place. We're going to get really serious with you. Those things are, it's a little bit like pestering and annoyance. But again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase the the cost on the speculator of just sitting there and not doing anything. You want to actually make that a burden, because the carrot side of the equation is, hey, you can either A, sell your place to someone who really wants to do something with it and make a lot of money and like everything's good. Two, you could actually do something with your property. Or three, you could lease it out to someone who would then do something with your property. Um, those things all take effort. And so what you want to do is just make it uncomfortable to stay seated in your chair. You want to like pick and poke at them so that it's like, okay, this is an annoyance. I got to do something, because doing something is what you want. At the very end of the day, the eminent domain thing is an option. The thing I don't like about the eminent domain thing is not only is it like the bazooka option, I mean, it's a very antisocial option. The things that you're going to get in there are going to look more like the Walgreens, that you've got up the street, as opposed to, the art gallery and the barber shop and the more fine grained stuff. The only way that this stuff can kind of exist is because the property owners here have low carrying costs. If you go up the street here and you look at these, like, Walgreens has very high land costs. I mean, when they got this, I'm assuming they bought up 5 or 6 properties, or, 5 or 6 units. Maybe it was 1 or 2 properties, rebuilt and redeveloped this. They've got a big, debt, a high return on investment thing they have to make in order to make that work. You go across the street, and if these have been, owned for multiple generations, they're not going to have that. And so you can get, a locksmith, which might not be like the greatest thing that you want, but that's a really high value per acre, serves a purpose.
Yeah, I would be really curious what the VPA is on that
Yeah.
locksmith shop.
Yeah, it'd be really good. And so you see, like, you've got great little fine grain stuff along here. If you go the eminent domain route, you're giving up on that fine grain, and you will likely get Jimmy John's and, like the whole plethora of modern franchise kind of things. Does that
What do
make
you think,
sense, Victoria?
Chuck, as a follow-up, what do you think about what Elisa asked in the chat? She said, what do you think about a vacancy tax? And she goes on, a local business district director suggested proposing it in the city as a vacancy accountability fee, or something that reframes the tax part and makes it seem more palatable to other businesses.
Okay. I feel like I think intellectually I understand it, and that makes sense. I think, okay, in Minnesota, you couldn't do that. Like, you're just not allowed to do it. I don't know if you could in, Oregon. I don't know if you could in California. I don't know if those things are legal. I don't know if it's legal in New Jersey. Everything's legal in New Jersey is what I remember being told, but so maybe you could do it there. I do know that what is legal in New Jersey and what is legal in Minnesota, I don't know about, where you're at, John, would be like a business improvement district. The difference being, a business improvement district would say, hey, we're going to put like a tax overlay on this business improvement district. We're going to collect so much. Again, you're kind of creating more of a stick. That money is then going to be spent in that district, generally like maintaining sidewalks, sweeping them up, taking care of the garbage, putting out planters. It's generally made to make that area nicer. If you're not benefiting from that, you're going to find that business improvement district tax super annoying, because it's just going to be like another cost for you. But yeah, I mean, if your state would allow you to do a vacancy tax, I think you're thinking of it in the right way. You want to increase you want to, they're sitting in a comfy chair right now, and basically like, all right, I've got my money in real estate. I'm sitting in this comfy chair. My investments are going up. Maybe not as much as the stock market would go up, but it's also not going to go down as much as the stock market will go down. It's a good, solid real estate investment. Been in the family for years, and I'm comfortable. What you want to do is make that chair less comfortable. A business improvement district tax will do that. If you could do a vacancy tax or fee, that would do that. So it just would depend on if it's legal where you're at or not.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I have another question that was sent in. After this question, raise your hand if you have something you'd like to ask as well. But we're going to stay in New Jersey for this next question. This
Cool.
comes from our friend Andrew Price in Jersey City, and
Mhm.
he like for he's in Jersey City, right? I can't remember. He's in
No,
somewhere.
he's in Hoboken.
Hoboken, you're right. Yes. Um, he says, for context, in New Jersey, we're debt happy and property taxes are extremely high. The question is, Andrew said he was speaking with a city manager who he feels like may have gotten offended by the suggestion that his city should run a surplus. And the context is that every time a big project comes up, the city gets very, very bond happy. But Andrew's like, well, why doesn't the city run a surplus so that we can actually accumulate wealth? And then when the big projects come up, we actually have the money to pay for it, rather than just going into debt with a bond or whatever. Chuck, I know this is something that you talk about in the first book. Cities running a surplus. Can you talk a little bit more about that in general, and then also Andrew's suggestion that, with a sizable fund, the city can be paying for larger projects rather than going into debt?
I feel like what Andrew is running into is the gap between what should happen and what reality is, right? If you're a city manager today, it is almost certain that your city is loaded up with debt, is making all kinds of payments, and increasing portions of your budget's going to debt service. And you have this long list of things you need to accomplish. And if some smart Alec Strong Towns guy walks in the door and says, dude, you should be running a surplus, not taking out more debt, they look at that and be like, that's completely insane. Because if I'm going to do anything on my to-do list, it's going to involve taking on more debt. I think that is really true. And I think it's true. I'm actually writing an article right now. We're in the middle of putting together uh, a package around what we're calling the fiscal health assessment. If you've heard us talk about the budget translator project we've been working on for the last year, we're about to roll that out. And the tool that we're going to release is called the fiscal health assessment. I'm writing an article in that series because one of the questions that is always brought up is that, well, you can't look at government the same way you look at a family. Governments and families are very different. Families have all these budget constraints that governments don't. And I think people who say that are conflating the federal government with local government. The federal government, there's all kinds of theories the federal government can run using debt, printing money, whatever. If you like those theories or don't like those theories, when you look at local government is exactly like a family. And so if I went to your family today and said, John, you should buy a car paying cash for it. And you should have a certain amount you're putting every month into savings. And you should save up for 20 years so you can pay your kids' college fund when they get there. And I said all this stuff. You'd be like, oh, yeah, that's very prudent, Chuck. But I had this life thing that happened to me. And I didn't, I switched jobs and I didn't get started saving till this point in my life. So I'm doing the best that I can. But like, I can't finance a car with cash and I can't, do this and that. Um, I feel like that's probably the reaction that Andrew's getting is that, like, yeah, in a real sense, this is what you would do. This is how it would be. But I have to play in this other world. I, I'm going to add this flavor to it because I think the problem that we run into is that when you play that debt game, there is an end to it. And this is what we're going to show with the fiscal health assessment. So this thing that we're releasing is a tool. In fact, let me show you kind of what this looks like under the hood because we've done this analysis on a whole bunch of different places. Let me bring up the screen here. We use Notion internally. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Notion or not, but it's a pretty slick tool. We've gone through and analyzed all of these cities. Let me show you the one that I wrote about yesterday. I put an article together yesterday about Houston. Oh, in fact, let me show you this because I actually put these slides together. as a presentation for one of my board members. Um, Here's what I did on Houston. Houston's mayor came out last year. I wrote an article about this, but said, "Hey, we've got this $160 million deficit. It's really huge. We're broke. It's a staggering $160 million deficit." Here's Houston's. This is data from our fiscal health analysis. So the idea of the fiscal health analysis is you go to the doctor and the doctor draws blood and takes blood pressure and all this. And then they give you like hey, here's where you're at. Here's your cholesterol. Here's your lipid count or whatever it is. Here's like the red flags that you've got. Here's your blood pressure, all that thing. So we're kind of doing the same thing with the city. We're taking their financial data and then we're just displaying it for them in a way that kind of shows where they're at. So this is their net financial position. The net financial position is the accumulation of all the surpluses and deficits that the city has ran over time. Right now, Houston, he said they've got this $160 million deficit for this year. Well, they've got a $14.6 billion cumulative deficit over the life of the city. That's how much they are in negative. That's how much more they've spent than they brought in during their life existence. $160 million in comparison is like 94 years of deficits. So they've been doing this a long, long, long time. If you look at their overall liabilities in comparison to how much money they bring in regularly, they've got, a few years ago, 8 years ago, they had 4 times the liabilities than they have revenues. They've shrunk that in recent years, but they shrunk that largely because, let me come back to that. They've got pandemic relief funds. They had historically low borrowing costs, and they've been shortchanging their infrastructure maintenance. 20 years ago, they had 67% of the useful life of infrastructure remaining. Today, they're down to 56%. Houston, and this is the one I was going to show you. This is a chart of their assets to their liabilities. So you look at all the assets they have, including counting their roads and sewers and stuff as assets, all their buildings, all their parks, and then you compare that to their liabilities. Anything under 1, you have more liabilities than assets. And in 2016, that's what occurred. They are insolvent. They've been on a positive trend since, but they've risen to a level that is slightly above insolvent, still kind of on that borderline. So you look at this, and if you went to Houston today and said, "Hey, you should be running a surplus, and you should be, paying cash for your road maintenance instead of bonding for 25, 30 years longer than the road's going to last. You should be doing these things." I think in a real world, like, yeah, you should be, but Houston's going to look at you and say, what the heck? We are in a fiscal disaster. The idea that we could do that is so far-fetched and ridiculous that, like, who are you? You're completely out of touch with where we're at. I think that's true for every city. I mean, we've analyzed like 40 of them, and Houston is not an anomaly. It's not an outlier. It's like exactly what we see everywhere. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah,
I like Andrew's question, but it's,
Yeah. It's just the kind of provocative question that we would expect from Andrew.
It is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the way we've had a lot of conversations internally about how we message this stuff. I've described the fiscal health assessment as being a nuclear bomb that we're about to detonate, because it's going to make every city look really bad. And every city is really bad. We've been saying for years. I mean, I started this blog in 2008 saying every city in North America is broke. And people were like, "That's a lot of hyperbole, Chuck. You're kind of a bomb thrower. You're kind of just, Chicken Little running around saying the sky is falling." And now we have the data to show that every city in the US is broke. This is going to be deeply embarrassing and deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people. But it's a lot like going to someone saying, "Hey, you've got really high blood pressure. Your cholesterol count is through the roof. your BMI is really bad, like you need some time at the gym, you need better eating habits, you need to get to sleep, cut back the caffeine. And if you do that, you can get back to like a healthier place. Our message to these cities is not going to be, hey, you spent 20 years eating junk food, you guys are horrible. It's going to be, all right, you're here now. How do we actually make this better? And part of making it better is you're going to have to structurally change things, start running a surplus, start, developing differently, building your cities differently, creating more productive land use patterns. And Houston won't fix this overnight. It's going to take a long time. Hoboken will not fix this overnight. It's going to take a long time. I think the thing about Hoboken is they're actually in a better position to fix it because their problem is not their development pattern as much as it is other things that are downstream. In Houston, they could run the most efficient government in the world, and their development pattern is not producing excess revenue for them. And so they have a more structural problem than a place like Hoboken has. If
Do
that
we
makes
have
sense.
do we have an ETA, even just a month for the fiscal health assessment? When is that going
Mhm.
to?
So um, we're talking weeks, not months. So I have 3 articles that I've written that are part of a 5 article series. And I think the first one is going to run Monday. The tool is actually like set up and done. And I think the team here just wants to organize it better. So I'll show you, like, this is what I was working on Brainerd. This is my hometown. I was working on them earlier. So this is what the data, part of what we're going to release is a spreadsheet that is empty that people can fill in. But then also training materials on like where to get this information, how to do it, because it comes from the city's financial reports, not their budget, but from their annual financial report. And then we put the equations in here to calculate these things and then have it create the charts. I know before this is released, there's going to be a explainer on how to find the data, an explainer on how to put it in here. And then we're also going to take the charts and let me give you the big feedback that I'm getting from our comms people is that, Chuck, financial assets to total liabilities is what a finance officer or accountant would say. It's not what like a human would say. So we need to actually like rename these different things and then give a little explanation of what it is and have like a below this line is good, above this line is bad, going in this direction is good, going in this direction is bad, so that like regular people can understand it. And I think that's really good feedback. So we have a meeting scheduled Friday morning to finalize that part. So this could be as soon as next week, but my likelihood would be, I would say like 2.5, 3 weeks from now is probably when it will be broadly available.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. All right, Scott, you want to unmute and ask your question? Scott in Indiana.
Hi. Hi, folks. A little background, Chuck. I've been been retired a couple of years, and I've been on a journey to learn about affordable housing.
Yeah.
And that journey took me to escaping the housing trap. I'd never heard of strong towns before, but I really enjoyed the heck out of that book. And then that introduced me to the Strong Towns organization. I've become a member in about the last month or so. I just finished the online series that Daniel Harrigus led. Really enjoyed that a bunch. So this is what I've really been into. I've lived in Carmel 7 years. In the course of the conversation, I discovered that you did a couple of podcasts on Carmel back in 2018. I'm sure you remember those.
I do.
So I've pointed those out to our city councilors. Did you, so I've started to get acquainted with the leaders of Carmel, armed with my Strong Towns questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
About city finances and things like that. So
Yeah.
I was able to get a meeting about 2 weeks ago with a gentleman named Henry Matetsky, who's the head of the redevelopment. Started talking about Strong Towns. And he's, oh, yeah, I know Chuck Marohn. I've hosted him here. I've talked to him a couple of times. Strong Towns is really some good stuff. I agree with about 90% of what they say. But Chuck's got it wrong about Carmel.
Yeah.
Um, so Mayor Brainerd, who was here forever, one of the things I thought was interesting in your podcast, you said, what's going to happen when Mayor Brainerd's no longer here? Well, Mayor Brainerd's no longer here. He's now retired, and a lady named Sue Finkham has taken a place. And she actually set up a housing task force that worked for about 8 or 9 months. They produced a report with a bunch of recommendations. That's going to turn into a standing housing commission. And the lady who's going to run that commission was in the meeting that I had with Henry Mostetsky a while back. So anyway, I'm going to be attending these meetings and learning but when I talk to Henry, I get the impression he's really deep into this. He's been at this probably like you have for decades. So I don't feel very well equipped to ask many questions. This guy's kind of way above me in terms of expertise on housing and how you do things the right way. So I'll get to my question here. One, my main question is I'm looking for your advice on sort of a concerned citizen like myself who's meeting people and trying to understand how things work. What would you advise me to do? The other thing is I would love for you to have Henry on a podcast and sort of do an update on the status of Carmel, 7 years later, because the changes that you were wondering about have now started to happen. So it might be an interesting time to revisit. And you just had up on Houston. I didn't know if you've done an updated analysis of Carmel's finances as well. I saw Carmel on your list, but it didn't have any boxes checked. The list that you just pulled up.
Is it really on the list?
Yeah, it was right. It was at the very bottom of where your blue check marks were at. I saw Carmel,
Oh yeah,
Indiana
there it is. Yeah.
It didn't have any check marks. So it looked like maybe you hadn't done it yet.
We hadn't done it yet. Those are like that's like the wish list of places. So someone must have added that.
Well, I've been sending emails about Carmel, and maybe my emails help get Carmel on the wish list. But
maybe. Well, first of all,
I'm concerned about my city. I did ask them about the debt. They said they're getting their debt retired early. Henry pulled up in the course. Daniel Harriga showed these graphics with the tall bars where the taxes are really pulling in lots.
Yeah.
He went, and I thought he might have gotten the graphs from Daniel Harrigas. He pulled up those graphs and started showing them to me, and how all these big businesses are really contributing to their tax base. So anyway, I'll stop there and get your input.
Well, I'm super happy you found us, and I'm really grateful you're here, and I'm glad that you're involved. My thing with Carmel from day one has been the debt. And the idea that there is a shortcut to the end goal. And this is, I think this is where I've philosophically kind of, rubbed up against Mayor Brainerd and like his staff and the team there. I'm going to say this from my perspective. I think I'm pretty smart. I don't think I'm smart enough to build a city on billions of dollars. They have billions of dollars of debt. I don't think I'm smart enough to build a city on billions of dollars of debt and get it right. I don't know as anybody is, the mayor, the staff that they've got there. And so I look at it and I say, they've been able to build something that is very interesting. I mean, I've had a conversation with Jeff Speck, who's part of the architectural team that's put it together. And I have a huge amount of respect for Jeff. Jeff has said, like, you've got it all wrong, Chuck. Like, this is great. It's good urban design. It's, it's really top-notch stuff. They've made the right key investments. I think from an urbanist standpoint, Jeff makes a really good case that this is very nice development. I don't think that's universally true, but I think that, in general, Carmel's one of the nicer, I mean, in Indiana, in the Midwest, it's one of the nicest design cities out there. It's really a very pleasant place. What Jeff does not ponder, and what I think the people running the city underestimate, is the shortcut of the debt part of this. The idea that it's like really easy to buy success quickly, have things look good quickly, but not really pay attention to the long-term viability, the volatility of it, the downside risk, the idea that you do have to go back now and maintain this stuff and take care of it. And I think that anyone who tells you they're going to retire the debt early and the debt is under control is maybe optimistically looking at the first life cycle debt costs, but not really looking at like the long-term carrying costs of building the community like that. And so I think there are outstanding questions. I think the last interview that I did was with John. Do you remember? It was the Aaron Wrenn.
Aaron
I think
Wrenn,
that's
yeah.
what it was. Yep, remember that?
Yes.
And Aaron Wrenn, we reached this consensus at the end where he said, we won't know for 20 or 30 years, but the Carmel approach is to kind of aggregate all the success from all around it and kind of be the last one standing. And if they can do that, they can probably pull it off. And I kind of walked away from that going, all right, well, maybe for Carmel, that is a successful strategy. I think that is yet to be seen. I know for Indiana, that's not a successful strategy. Just basically we're going to have one successful city and then dozens of unsuccessful cities, but we'll see. I would love to have, I would be happy to, particularly if you could help make it happen, Scott. I'd love to have them back on the podcast. And I think I should kind of dig into the numbers a little bit again and get an update before I did that. But yeah, those outstanding questions, I guess will be around long enough to see if they were valid or not.
I think I'm in touch with the right people. So yeah, I think I
Okay.
could make it happen. The counselor who's going to head the housing commission, she thought that was just a fabulous idea to do a follow-up podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the city planner would think so as well.
Okay. I've got the housing task force webpage up here. So I'll check that stuff out and let's keep in touch and make it happen.
Will do. Who should I contact with at Strong Towns? Who should I use it as a point of contact?
You can email me. That would just be chuck@strongtowns.org. And if you wanted to make sure that it got to the top of the list, you can copy Carly. I'll put her email in here. It's just, yeah, Carly@strongtowns.org, because she'll make it happen.
That'd be great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. And now we'll go to Aaron Caldwell in Fayetteville.
Yep, thanks. Fayetteville, Arkansas. So
Awesome.
Up in the booming northwest corner of the state.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a problem, or my question has to do with that booming growth. Just to give you like some context, Fayetteville alone has doubled its population since the 2000 census. And I think our problem here is kind of unique because it has to do with the college and it being a college town. And in full disclosure, myself and my spouse are both university professors within the system. So we're a little biased towards the university itself. But in being involved in strong towns, like there's a lot of progressive kind of strong towns-esque policies in the space, but there's starting to be a growing community backlash, especially related to the university, because the university hasn't kept up with the student housing. And in their defense, it's expensive, long drawn out process to build the student housing. But what's happened is all of the neighborhoods around the campus are getting flooded with students, and in particular getting bought up, bulldozed, and big, huge 5/1 style buildings are going up that are meant to be then sold to students to rent. So I'm really starting to get worried based on, I mean, I'll just give you an example. Parking mandates may be back on the table. That's like one of the things people are pushing for.
Yep.
And so I'm really worried about kind of losing the information battle with the community and some more regressive policies getting put back on the table. So, any advice on what could be done to kind of mitigate the stresses of that student population growth? And is there even anything that like the planning commission could do to impose design standards? Because that's also the part of it. It's not just that it's student housing. it's the look of the building not fitting with the community is the community backlash as well. So is there anything they could do? Because one of the things the planning commission that I've talked to them is they go, hey, our hands are tied. We have rules. They're going to take us to court if we don't like approve it because
Yeah.
they've checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
So any advice on how to deal with the growing pains would be much appreciated.
Well, this is one of those issues where I tell people that you cannot, there is no solution that has no trade-off, right? There's no way to solve this problem where everybody gets everything that they want. So this is like a matter of dealing with trade-offs. And I think when you start with this, you should acknowledge that if you live within 6 blocks of the university, or even 12 blocks of the university, you live within 12 blocks of this fantastic amenity, this great place that you can go, walk around, be in, attend events, be part of a culture that is exciting and innovative and like full of energy. And that a lot of the reason why people want to live near the university is because they want to be part of that. That is awesome. It's fun. It's really cool. It's great. There are people building housing today. I've talked to them that are going around the country building housing developments aimed at baby boomers who want to live near universities because it's such a desirable thing to do, right? So let's start with that as like the base. If you live in an area by a university, you can walk over and maybe audit a class or take part in like a world-class seminar or be part of something. But you're also going to have drunk kids in your yard on Friday night peeing behind the tree and, you know, having loud parties on football days. Like it's just, that's part of the other side of the trade-off. And I can't, you know, if you want to live in Venice, you're going to live in like one of the most beautiful cities in the world and you're going to be flooded for 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks out of the year. And like, we can say like, it's horrible. It's unbearable, but it's like part of the deal. It's part of what happens. Right. So we can't take that away. The thing I think that you can do or you can have a big impact on is what the maturing process looks like. A lot of university towns, because they're paralyzed over this tension, right? Like, I want to live by the university. I don't want my neighborhood to change. You know, the university's growing. It's offering world-class things. Yay. That's bringing in more people. Boo. You know, like to resolve that tension, what happens is that they don't do anything. They kind of suppress development and then you get these explosions. So we're going to have single family homes, maybe larger homes, maybe some duplexes, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, bam, we get a 5/1 and it doesn't look like our neighborhood. It looks like a corporate university campus. And like, I don't like this. I think that if I were talking to the community around the college, I would say the idea that we can keep it like it is, static stasis, is not a viable thing. It's not a viable thing with a university here. It's not a viable thing without a university here. But with a university here and it becoming this active, like exciting place, and even more so year after year after year, this is gonna change this neighborhood. The question is, do we want that change to be a maturing so that the neighborhood has the same look and feel and character, but just in a more mature state? Or do we want to lock the neighborhood down and have that change be kind of out of proportion, random across the neighborhood? I would prefer the former, and what you've got set up is the latter. The Plan Commission's ordinances, as you're describing it, facilitate that latter. And I think that is, again, like a default that cities tend to fall back on. We can't have a real mature conversation. We can't figure this out. We can't reach some kind of like, all right, here's how this neighborhood evolves from being a toddler to an adolescent, from an adolescent to a teen. We can't figure that out. So we're going to have this thing where like we'll have incentive to do this or that or this or that. And then you get this out of place style of development, or you get like radical rezonings, or you get those kind of things. The demand is very real. And I think the hard part for universities when we recognize this is that if the neighborhood can't meet the demand organically by having a single family home now house 4 college students, having someone convert their place into a duplex and house 3 college students, having someone put up a backyard cottage and house a college family. If the neighborhood can't like do that, the school feels compelled to, in a sense, use their leverage to meet that demand. And the only way the school is capable of, because they're working in big budgets and big numbers and big, is to get a huge bond and do something radical and transformative. And that puts the neighborhood at odds with the school, when really the whole reason you want to live in that neighborhood is because you love the school. I don't have an easy solution, but to me, there's like 2 paths you can go down. And the one path takes a lot of discussion and a lot of conversation, and is more nuanced, but I think will keep the character of the neighborhood. And the other one is this more brute force one. If I were trying to advise the city on how to do this, I would tell the city to not have your planning team work on this, but to have a planner who worked with like 5 or 6 people who were good at social work and conflict resolution and like meeting with people, and have that be the team that I deploy to that neighborhood. Because what you need more than anything else is not a technical conversation, but a human conversation. Does that
Great.
make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And like what you're describing about the restricted explosive growth completely aligns with the reality on the ground. Because I'll give you an example. The main strip is Dixon Street, and there's
Yeah.
been an empty parking lot at one section that's been trying to be developed for the past 25 years. And the last plan that got almost to completion was a thing of like 8 townhomes. And that got destroyed in like 2008 because it ruined the neighborhood with the local people. Now, this year, there's going to be a 6-story, 600-bedroom monstrosity that people hate going in there, but it's going to get forced through now because there's too much capital behind it and they have good lawyers,
Yeah.
essentially. So I've tried to tell people that, where it's like, well, if you don't allow the duplex, you're going to get the tower later, and not too much later. So yeah, it fits perfectly with what we're seeing.
Well, one of the tense things about universities right now, and I'm looking at your town. I mean, you can see just from Google Maps, you know, like cute Main Street, right? And now, very large building, and then there's your, out of a lot of people would look at this and go, "Hey, that's progress, right? Look at that big building, you know." But I can understand how if you live in the neighborhood, you're looking at that as like that one of these things is not like the other, right? Like if that's what you're telling
Yeah.
me the whole future of our neighborhood is like really tough. Um, I, I think that the hard thing right now for universities, and this is why to me the more incremental maturing approach of the neighborhood is better. Um, the demographics of this country do not
Yep.
favor university expansion. And if universities go and build these huge housing things and take on 20+ year debt to do it, they may find in 10 years that they don't have the enrollment to fill those things. And now you're cutting programs, you're doing other things because you've got money sunk into something
Yep.
that is not helpful. If that were spread out through the neighborhood, owned in individual ways, there's a lot more dynamism and a lot more ways to respond to that. And you're not stressing your university, because the worst thing you can happen in this neighborhood, the worst case scenario is I live near the university because I love the university. The university goes out and builds housing that doesn't fit the context in the neighborhood and changes it in ways I don't like. Then the university has financial problems because they built that housing. And then the university has to cut the things that make me actually want to live near the university. So like, this is a problem. It's like the negative reinforcing circle of life, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So there's urgency if you live here to actually be part of the solution.
100%. And the enrollment cliff is a real. I could give you a whole presentation on why the University of Arkansas may actually come out on top in the enrollment cliff, but it's a real stress that I know that administrators are freaking out, would probably be putting it mildly about. But There may be
Yeah, I
some
would.
demographic things for us that'll insulate us. But I agree. Like, I think that's why it's taking so long for this huge next student housing to get built on the actual on-campus one. Because I
Yeah,
think secretly they're kind of like, well, let's not spend the money if we don't have to.
I do. You do free tuition for in-state too, right? If you reach a certain GPA in high school.
I can't remember what the scholarship program for in-state, but it's very forgiving for in-state.
Yeah.
UCA is actually the one that does the completely free tuition.
Oh, okay.
University of Central Arkansas for in-state. But just to give you context, 49.5% of the students at the main campus are out of state.
Mm,
And by the way, it's capped at 49.5 because the
okay.
state, because Little Rock is like, hey, you all better be letting in
Right.
Arkansas students. Um, it's mostly coming from Texas and Oklahoma because they're so far behind in maintaining their higher ed institutions. So we get flooded with,
Sure,
like, essentially
sure.
the way it works. If you can't get into A&M or UT, the next
Yeah.
big SEC school to attend is us. So they come to
Okay.
us.
Okay. Okay.
So we're, well, that's just to give you an example. We used to give a tuition remission to the out-of-staters. We stopped doing that because we
Mhm.
realized they're going to
Don't
come
need to.
anyways, and
Right.
why give them the discount? We'll take the money. Yeah,
John,
that's
I realize that we're at the time. I have to go in a little bit, but I can do one more if you want. Otherwise, if you feel compelled to shut us off, I just talk too long, I think, is the problem.
No, I do think that we should probably wrap it up. But I want to I want to end by giving a plug for a fantastic webinar that we're gonna be doing tomorrow. Is it a webinar or a webcast? I can't remember.
Well, I think
We have very
branding
specific
wise,
definitions.
I think we have to call them webcasts now.
Okay, all right. It's a
Yeah.
webcast, not a webinar. No, but it is with Joe Minicozy of Urban 3. We were talking earlier about value per acre. We were talking about the heat maps of like Carmel, Indiana, and elsewhere. That is all coming out of this tremendous firm in Asheville called Urban 3. And that was founded by Joe Minicozy, who has been a longtime partner of ours. He is doing a webcast with us tomorrow that for members and for local conversation leaders, it's called Where is Your City's Wealth Going? Joe is one of the most dynamic and fun presenters I've ever seen. He has a way of making municipal finance fun and interesting. I highly encourage you to make it tomorrow if you are able. It's going to be great. You do have to kind of pre-register, which you can do with the link that I dropped in the chat. Um, there were a couple folks who weren't able to get their questions answered. Go ahead and send those to me. Aaron, I know yours is particularly urgent because you have a
I'm
meeting.
sorry.
No, no, this is great. Um, I appreciate you being here, Chuck. Thank you everyone for being here. But just there are too many good things happening out in the world with our folks. And so I think we're always going to run out of time, no matter how succinct you and I manage to be. Thanks everyone who have participated for sending in your questions, for asking questions, and for being engaged in the chat. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Chuck, any final words?
Oh, just thank you. It's so nice, like to hear Scott, your story about finding us. And yeah, we just want to make this available. We get so many people who email us and have questions, and I'm like, I can't answer all these. And if we can get people together regularly and do this, it really is meaningful for us to help people too. So thank you for being here, and thanks for all you do.
Yep, and answering them live helps other folks too.
It does.
All right, cool. Thanks
Take
everyone.
care. Yeah, Michael.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Bye.
bye.